Episode 23, titled Marching Out the Zombies 2 of Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, has just released, and it continues on from last week with Giselle summoning her latest addition to a zombie army onto the battlefield in the form of zombified Hitsugaya. Episode 23 faithfully adapts just over 5 chapters worth of manga material, with content spanning from chapter 592 all the way up until the first 3 pages of chapter 597. Now be sure that you stick around until the end of this episode, because we have a post-credit scene which adapts material from the very start of chapter 588, and it showcases YHWACH and company arriving within the royal palace. I know that some of you were really excited for this week's episode because it features your favorite Sternritter Pepe finally showing off his disturbing powers of love, as well as Mayuri stealing the limelight with his witty remarks and sarcastic humor. The MVP of the 1000-Year Blood War arc appears to have a solution for every problem, as we see him deal with several zombified Shinigami, as well as making quick work of 2 Sternritters all within the span of a single episode. Now speaking of defeating Sternritter, episode 23 also features an incredible anime exclusive scene which reveals to us a fight that had occurred off screen within the manga. Now we are shown the battle between Byakuya against the 3 Sternritter, Candice, Nanana and Robert. This anime only scene was hinted at from another exclusive scene that we had received in last week's episode, where Byakuya was confronted by the enemy who had reminded him that they were still alive and kicking just as he was about to set his sights on pursuing YHWACH. So now that we have a basic overview of the episode and what things we have to look forward to, over the course of this video I'm going to be discussing the pacing of the story, as well as briefly talking about how faithfully this episode adapts the manga material, and lastly discussing some of the staff who had contributed to this latest installment of Bleach. Now make sure that you stick around until the end of this video, because I will be analysing this week's post-credit scene and what hints it reveals about the direction of Core 2 as we fastly approach towards the finale. So without further delay, here are my thoughts on the all-new episode of Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. In terms of the story told and the pacing of the episode, I was really impressed by the amount of content that was adapted, while the anime staff had still found space to include an anime exclusive fight sequence. We begin with a scene before the intro song, which adapts all of chapter 592 into this 3-minute segment, with little to no changes in the adapted material. Zombified Hitsugaya looks really imposing as he makes quick work of both Ikkaku and Yumichika. I really loved how he was just beating them both up and Mayuri was just casually watching, not even wanting to assist them. Hitsugaya and Mayuri then begin their battle after the opening song, as the scientist expresses his desire to test many drugs on him. After the opening song, we begin with material from chapter 593 as we pick up from where we had left off, and personally I really loved Mayuri throughout this episode. From how he unveils the sensor that he uses on his Zanpakuto, which enhances his defenses and as a result renders Hitsugaya's strikes ineffective against him, as well as how he torments zombified Hitsugaya, who believes that he has repeatedly defeated Mayuri only for him to just return him back in time to the start of the fight. I was nervous as to how this moment would be translated into the anime, but thanks to the incredible efforts of the voice actors and the animators who had provided us with stunning visuals, I think that everything worked out very nicely in the end. Hitsugaya's Bankai looked amazing, with the anime staff proving that lighting and visual effects are their strong point, combining the bright blue ice of Daiguren Hyorenmaru along with Mayuri's blinding sunsuit was super effective. All of this contrasted against the red skies left me feeling awestruck, and to be honest, speaking about the red skies, I haven't really noticed them much while watching Core 2, so I think that it's safe to say that all of the worrying was for nothing. Seeing Hitsugaya get frustrated with Mayuri was very entertaining, and I loved that Mayuri's long monologues and explanations were kept intact in the anime, because it just makes his battle so fascinating to see unfold, with all of the science that he drops while he is explaining the mechanism of action for his drug that he gives to Hitsugaya, which grants him the power to see the past. Mayuri takes control of the battle as he injects Hitsugaya with another drug which immobilizes him before he is then confronted by zombified versions of Kensei, Rose and Rangiku. This brings us to the midpoint of the episode as we take a break from Mayuri and we shift our focus to Byakuya and his opponents. The second half of episode 23 begins with a welcomed surprise as we are given a very impressive 2-minute anime exclusive fight scene where Byakuya takes on Robert, Candice, and Nanana. Each of them are given enough time to individually clash against Byakuya, as well as showcase their power, with Robert really getting the limelight as he activates his holy form God Step and he rushes towards Byakuya before he is swiftly taken out by Byakuya's Bankai. Only moments before his clash with Robert, he had taken out Candice and Nanana with just his Shikai alone. Now this entire sequence was really well animated, and it fleshes out the 3 manga panels from chapter 594 where we see the Sternritter just laying on the ground defeated as Byakuya towers over them. Now following this anime exclusive scene, the anime matches up with a sequence of events from the manga as we continue to adapt the manga material, with Lil Toto and Meninas commenting on how strong Byakuya has become and where on earth Pepe is. Thankfully, a lot of Pepe's monologuing is streamlined within the anime. Now I know that you all love this guy, but honestly I'm not a massive fan, so I was glad to see as little of him as possible within the anime. Him going on about battles being for the sake of love was all cut down as we see him get frustrated by his inability to control Byakuya, as he then activates his very hideous holy form. And again, I know that you guys find this form very cute, but I was just glad to see Kensei and Rose appear and dropkick Pepe out of the scene. The episode wraps up as we see Mayuri join Byakuya, as the episode remains very faithful to the manga by showing us a brief flashback of how Mayuri was able to save the zombified Shinigami and then subsequently defeat Giselle. Once again, all of Mayuri's long monologuing is thankfully kept intact, and I am just so impressed with the balance that was striked within this episode. They really adapted the manga material very faithfully, and if cuts had to be made, it was stuff that we really didn't care much for, or it was throwaway dialogue that didn't affect the plot or the portrayal of the characters. We wrap up the episode with Lil Toto appearing before Pepe as she devours him, as we cut to the credits, with episode 23 having adapted all the way up until the first 3 pages of chapter 597. Make sure that you don't miss the short post-credit scene this week, because we finally get to see YHWACH appearing within the Royal Palace, which is taken from material that wasn't included within last week's episode, as we adapt a few pages from the start of chapter 588 here. Overall, we had a fair amount of story content within this episode, with everything feeling very well paced and really leaving me feeling just impressed overall. This is hopefully the pace at which the remainder of Core 2 will be adapted at, so hopefully we won't have any major cutting of content, and there will just be additions and changes that are being made which will enhance the story hopefully. I want to now talk about the anime staff who had contributed to this week's episode and the things that I feel were done well in the animation department. This was an episode that was full of surprises for me. Of course, finding out that it was storyboarded by the GOAT Wakabayashi himself was a dead ringer, and this was going to be an episode to remember, and if I'm being honest, it turned out to be exactly like this. The episode on average was very well animated, even non-priority cuts moved with a degree of flair that made every sequence engaging to watch. The episode used multiple sequence loops that actually served to help the flow of the fights throughout the episode in a manner that they normally can't. These sequence loops are used dynamically, along with merging them with genuinely good cuts so that the loops don't feel overdone. Knowing that Yugen did some work on this episode makes me feel upset, because I know that this may have been his last episode for Bleach that we'll see in a while. I couldn't quite tell what exactly his cut was in this episode, but I highly suspect it was the really well done sequence of Kensei punching the hell out of Pepe's face. I know that this is something that a lot of us Bleach fans wish that we could have done ourselves. It's hard to definitively say that this cut was done by Yugen, because it appears to have been heavily corrected by the talented Wakabayashi. So even if this wasn't his cut, I want to thank Yugen for being absolutely fantastic, and I hope that we get to see him again in the future course of Bleach. We also had an appearance from Kyohei Ibata, a Naruto Boruto animator who animated the exchange between Hisagi and Byakuya as they ran across the buildings. It was a really good cut that made their fight feel very engaging. I hope that he sticks around and gives a cut here and there, because I really do enjoy his animation style. Overall, I think that my favorite cut from this episode would have to be from Robert vs Byakuya, because that whole sequence was done fantastically, and I hope that the animator who worked on that sequence is proud of themselves. The storyboard by Wakabayashi did a fantastic job at even elevating the dull moments, and I cannot help but to be impressed with his ability to tune the quality of storyboards to fit the needs of an episode. I'm hoping that he actually does the storyboards for episode 25 and 26, where he can let his creativity run wild a bit more, because every episode that he contributes to proves that he's still got it. He was the action and effects animation director for this episode, and his influence is evidenced throughout all of the episode. His corrections were part of why even the less stellar cuts of this episode were still so engaging to watch, and he's a talent that I sincerely hope will stay with us throughout the production. Once again, the moral of the story is always bet on Atsushi Wakabayashi. This episode was just very well done, and I found it to be a visual pleasure, and I cannot wait to see what they have for us now that we reach the final 3 episodes, especially when a relatively low priority episode like this one was given so much love and attention. This brings us to the end of episode 23, Marching Out the Zombies 2. This episode was another strong installment which builds upon the foundations of last week's episode as we head towards the finale of Core 2. Not only did we see several battles during the episode, we also had a post-credit scene which finally reveals to us YHWACH, YHWACH, and Uryu arriving within the royal palace. This was content that wasn't adapted into last week's installment, as this sequence of events has been rearranged in order to give us impactful cliffhangers like the one that we have seen this week. We have 3 episodes left which will be releasing over the span of 2 weeks, with episodes 25 and 26 being released together as a double feature, so we can expect the battle between YHWACH and company against the Zero Division to really begin in the next few episodes. There have been several rumors that there are a lot of additions that will be made to the material that is adapted into these last 3 episodes. Hopefully we'll get new fight sequences, new lines of dialogue, and possibly new techniques and abilities being showcased for the very first time. I really enjoyed episode 23 and once again preferred the pacing of this week's episode, as it gave the material enough breathing room with some space left over for additions like Byakuya's anime exclusive fight scene. I am very excited to see where we go from here, and I look forward to hearing what all of you thought about the new episode of Bleach. Be sure to stick around to the channel by subscribing, because I will be uploading my follow-up manga vs anime comparison video tomorrow, where I will be going over every cut, change, and addition that has been made to this week's episode. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my manga vs anime video tomorrow. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.